Hi, Cavan.
Hi, Noel.
Just made you co-host.
Okay, great. Let's explore sharing the screen here. Okay. Can everybody see my screen with the mushroom basket?
Yes.
Okay, great. So hello everyone. Should I wait for a minute? It's 9:50 right now to get started.
I think you're probably okay to start.
Okay. Hi everyone. I'm Cavan Patterson. I hope you guys can see me pretty well from my my living room, dining room area. So it's been quite some time since I've done anything like this, so I'll do my best to not let my nerves get to me, but I've got a lot of pretty pictures and a lot of topics to cover, so I think that we'll try and get through it so that everybody has an opportunity to ask some questions, because I'm sure that there will probably be some. One of the things that occurred to me while I was putting this together is that, well, let's move on to the next slide here. This is foraging tips and fundamentals for homesteaders. I'm going to cover some safety tips and some resources, go over edible species of our spring, and then cover some seasonal highlights. And some more about me. I have a certification for wild mushroom food safety that is regulated by the USDA. I'm the founder and CEO of a company called Wild Purveyors that I'll talk more about here in a minute. I've always been an avid outdoors enthusiast. I love to fly fish, even though I don't get to do it as much as I'd like. I've always been a hiker, and I am a husband and a father. And my kids love to get out there. My kids are 2 and 5, going on 6. And they talked to me. My son the other day was asking about mushrooms. He wants to go and pick mushrooms. This is his first morel that he found with me last year. And he gets excited about mushrooms too, which is pretty awesome to see that. Wild Purveyors is a business that I started in 2009 that we primarily do wholesale, but we also do retail. You can find us at wildpurveyors.com. We focus on specialty seasonal produce and pastured meats, wild harvested and exotic seasonal foods. And we supply lots of restaurants around Western PA and some in Central PA. We work with farms all over the PA, New York, Maryland region. And we've set up a food network. We run trucks around and go straight to the farm. We're very true to terms, farm to table operation in that regard. We specialize in seasonal produce and certified organic, and we have lots of gluten-free options as well. The wild mushroom safety certificate is a 5-year program that's regulated by the USDA. It covers identification, storage, and sale. It licenses myself and my business for Pennsylvania, New York, Virginia, Georgia, North Carolina, South Carolina. I am licensed for 32 species of edible wild mushrooms, which also requires knowledge of approximately 90 species of poisonous mushrooms and lots of species of trees. There's critical elements of identification of certain species, to not only be able to identify the mushroom visually, but it has lookalikes that are so similar that you need to know its habitat, which includes the trees that it grows in association with. And you also need to know what those poisonous mushrooms look like so that you can exclude or rule those out when you're identifying those mushrooms. This is a list of the mushrooms that we're certified for. We're not going to cover all these, but I just wanted to show you guys. We can come back to this if you want, but I don't want to leave this up too long. But there's a lot of them. This is just an image of a morel that will be coming up pretty soon. We're going to see these popping up very quickly in the next few weeks. Black trumpets are later on in the season. Lion's mane, and all these mushrooms I'm showing you, they all come up in our area. So you have a great opportunity to find these mushrooms if you frequent Lake Michaud and local forests. This is the beefsteak mushroom, super interesting, not very common, but a great edible. It's called beefsteak because it eats like a steak. It also bleeds like a steak, interestingly, when it's super fresh. Hen of the woods later on in the season, wine cap mushrooms. I'm scrolling through some of these pretty fast because we're going to cover them in more detail. The king bolete, I didn't get this one up, but this is the bluet, chicken of the woods mushroom, honey mushroom. This is actually, incidentally, the largest organism known to man in the Pacific Northwest. There is an organism that's been documented to grow in over 2,200 acres by DNA samples. So mushrooms are pretty incredible. And this is a chanterelle, black trumpets growing in some moss there. And the hedgehog or sweet tooth mushroom. So just to give you guys an introduction to what foraging is, the basic description is that it's the act of finding food in the wild, in wild ecosystems, and basically uncultivated. So we can encourage this growth, and it's still, I think, wild foraging. By transplanting certain things. Certain mushrooms can be transplanted, certain plants can be transplanted. When we transplant them into environments or ecosystems that are similar to where we find them, they'll thrive. And I've had some great success transplanting things like watercress, ramps, certain mushrooms like wine cap mushrooms. We'll go over those. The practice is super cool. It's such a fundamental part of, I think, our existence, going back millennia, to our true roots. We're hunter-gatherers. So it's just a super cool thing to be able to go out into the woods and, not only identify things, but find food and then share that food with our community. And that's one of the things that I've always enjoyed doing, whether it be through my business or with my family and friends. But hopefully the presentation enables you guys to get out there, find some things, and share it with your community as well. So this, I think, is one of the most important things in this entire presentation. I want you guys to pay attention to, and I'm going to read all of it because some of these things, like literally, they will kill you if you aren't identifying things properly. I don't want to scare anybody, but like there really are mushrooms growing out in our local area that if you consume them, even just a little bit, like you don't need to eat the whole thing, but there's like sayings that like, it's the most, whatever it is, you just don't want to eat it. So when in doubt, throw it out. if you don't know what it is, if you can't positively identify it, if you're not 100% certain, you absolutely should not consume it, period. We'll talk a little bit later on about identifying things. You know, you can always take a sample with you, do a spore print when it comes to mushrooms, you know, refer to references, but, you know, everything has a poisonous lookalike for the most part, and gastrointestinal distress is just, it's not fun, and it can be very scary and messy. And, you know, again, just to reiterate, some lookalikes will kill you. There's a mushroom that's commonly known as death cap. It's just a white parasol mushroom. I didn't add it into the presentation, and I should have, but you know, I think I'm going to continue to encourage everyone that if you want to forage for mushrooms, you really do need to get a reference guide. And all of the reference guides that I'll recommend, they will cite these mushrooms that are of great concern that you should stay away from. The mushrooms that don't kill you, like, or worse, they'll cause renal failure, permanent damage to your liver. I mean, like, it's really no joke. So you really do need to be careful. You really do need to know what you're doing, and you shouldn't you know, consume anything if you're not 100% certain what it is. You always want to be prepared. I find the most enjoyable experiences that I have foraging are when I have all the things that I know that I need. A field guide. If I have questions, if I'm not certain about something, you know, being able to pull out a good field guide and scroll through just to, you know, take a look. And then, you know, lots of really good field guides, like the ones I'll point out later, they will reference things that grow in association with, you know, what you're trying to identify, along with, you know, other key plants and trees that you should look out for, that, you know, are going to indicate that you have found what you think you found. Always bring a journal, you know, write things down, make notes for yourself. I've been doing this for almost 2 decades, and I still do that. I still, you know, take notes to, you know, record what I'm finding, and in what kind of association with other species. It's super helpful to really develop the confidence necessary to go out and find wild food. Always bring collection equipment. I probably could have included some more some slides about this, but, you know, collection equipment would include like a sharp knife. I always use paper bags as opposed to plastic bags when it comes to mushrooms. I will use plastic bags for some plants, but we want to avoid the paper bags for mushrooms because that actually creates a microenvironment, and that will cause rot and decay very quickly, with some species like literally within the day. So we want to avoid plastic for the mushrooms. Always hydrate, bring yourself some water. The phone, the cell phone is a great thing. You know, the smartphone is a great thing for taking photographs, and you know, also, you know, if you have connection, the internet really does have some fantastic resources these days. So it can really be a lot of what you need if you're in an area of service, but that's not always reliable. So I always, again, bring a guidebook with me. And some collection tips for mushrooms. You know, we always want to have a basket. Bags don't really work very well. Some mushrooms are very fragile. They will get crushed when you try and collect them. And it's no fun to find super beautiful mushrooms, especially if you know, take a picture, because sometimes when you get it home, it doesn't look as pretty, especially if you don't have a basket. A sharp pocket knife or kitchen shears actually work really well for collecting mushrooms, especially like chanterelles, which are in this basket here. And again, just a reminder about, you know, paper bags versus plastic bags when it comes to collecting mushrooms. So first we're going to cover spring plants, and a lot of these things, come up in our backyard. But these are all the things that we're going to see coming up in the wild over the course of the next 2 months, basically. So first, what you're going to find in your backyard that you can consume and enjoyably, because there's certainly lots of things that I'm not going to cover that are edible, but just they're not really that delicious. So if you can see my cursor, I think you probably can. This is onion grass. It's literally everywhere. A lot of people treat it like a nuisance. If you treat your yard, I definitely wouldn't eat it. But if you don't treat your yard with any chemicals or pesticides, herbicides, anything like that, this is totally safe to eat. It's nice. You can treat it like chives. Another thing that a lot of people have in their yards, especially if you don't treat your yard, is going to be dandelions. Dandelion greens are they're really nice, bitter. There's lots of recipes for delicious dandelion green salads with like bacon dressing and such. And the flower heads can be used to make dandelion wine and other fun things. Miner's lettuce comes up in a lot of people's yards, especially if you have like some good moisture and drainage. And miner's lettuce is really vegetal and delicious. And wintercress also comes up. It can be very nice. It's quite bitter, like dandelion greens, but it is it's nice and vegetal. And if it's paired with the right foods, it can be quite enjoyable as well. So here are the things that are really fun that we're going to find this spring that may grow in your backyard, but not likely. And some things do. Like I do have some ostrich ferns in my backyard. I'm very fortunate in that, and I can pick fiddleheads right behind my house, which is awesome. I've transplanted watercress a couple of times. I've had to, it hasn't established well, but it will grow throughout the season. It just hasn't come back the next year. That is really nice. A lot of people probably have Japanese knotweed, and nettles could quite possibly come up in your backyard. If you have any kind of woods, you probably are going to see the garlic mustard greens. Ramps, if you live in a wooded area, it's possible that you have them in your backyard too. I know lots of people that do. So the first thing we're going to talk about is stinging nettles. And stinging nettles do sting. It's quite startling at first. And if you're wearing shorts and walking through a riparian area, riparian being stream banks or close to waterways, lakes, what have you, marshy areas. If you're in shorts and you're walking through some, high weeds, just looks like weeds unless you know how to identify it, you'll find out quickly that it does in fact sting. Feels kind of like a bee sting, but not quite as intense. If you're harvesting it without gloves, you will feel that that sensation in your hands for the better part of the day. It actually is used in some places for like a healing benefit, but that biochemical sensation is destroyed when you cook it. So if you cook it, you're not going to have any issues. The inflammatory effects here I cover a little bit more with, you can see these little spines that cause the stinging and burning sensation. You listed here the irritants with the histamine, which can cause the swelling, the serotonin, that's how it's used in some the benefit of some medical practices where that serotonin can cause ultimately a good relief. And again, it's destroyed by heat. So when we harvest it with gloves, particularly, and we make tea with it, or we cook with it, it destroys that sensation and there's no concerns. And stinging nettles are delicious. They're really fantastic, especially when we lightly braise them, like finish things with them. Just toss it in at the end of the cooking. It has like a really good bite to it, kind of like spinach, and it's delicious. One of my favorite things to cook with. Stinging nettles. Japanese knotweed is a nuisance plant. It's an invasive, but when it is very small, it is a delightful edible. So some things to cover before we move on to the next slides. You can harvest this at will. I mean, literally, it's really hard to permanently remove it. And I'm sure that if you're a homesteader, a farmer, a gardener, you're aware of it, you're familiar with it. You're definitely not looking to introduce it or transplant it. It would transplant really easy, but I wouldn't do it. It's high in oxalic acid, which is a concern. That gives it a lemony flavor. But if you eat too much oxalic acid, it can cause arthritic swelling. So it'll actually make you feel like you have arthritis. Stay away from the older stuff and don't want to consume too much. Like I wouldn't eat this stuff all day long, but it is delicious. It's great for pollinators, makes wonderful honey. These are the young shoots. When collected, you just want to take the tops. I mean, this really is a good example of how much you want to take. These are actually very tall. I probably wouldn't collect these, but this is what the young shoots look like before they grow up to be these mature plants. You're going to focus on the top 4 to 6 inches, new growth only. If you like kimchi and you've ever made kimchi, this stuff is awesome. Makes awesome kimchi. The next plant we're going to talk about is watercress, and this is something that grows all throughout the Cumberland Valley. I found it in so many waterways. It's really awesome. It's in the nasturtium family, so it has that similar kind of peppery flavor, vegetal, herbal, peppery flavor. It only grows in flowing water. And it flourishes in colder weather. So spring and fall is when we're going to find watercress. As you can see here, these images show it. These are just huge, patches of watercress growing like literally right out of the stream. I wouldn't really cook with it. It's really going to kind of destroy that peppery flavor. I really only eat it fresh, add it to salads, use it as a garnish. It's really wonderful. And moving on to fiddleheads. Everyone has seen a fiddlehead, I'm sure, at one time or another. All ferns produce fiddleheads. They are the way that the plant presents its new shoots. And when it comes right out of the ground, it comes out as a furled up fiddlehead and then opens up into the fern fronds that we are all very familiar with. All fiddleheads are edible, though the ostrich fern is the most desirable. It is native to our area. It grows in early spring. I would selective harvest this. If you just cut down all the fiddleheads that are coming up, you're literally just going to kill the entire new growth of that plant. I'm not exactly sure about the biology of this plant and its life cycle. So, I'd just be cautious. I know it's not endangered, but, if you're concerned about maintaining, especially if it grows in your backyard, you definitely don't want to cut them all off. So only take the biggest ones, and they're going to grow along. They're going to grow in riparian areas along waterways and in marshy areas. The way I cook them is typically to saute them, use them in place of plants like broccoli. It's got a nice vegetal flavor, slightly bitter, great with trout. A lot of these plants are great with trout. If you're a fisherman or you enjoy fish, trout is going to be a thing that's going to pair really well with lots of the spring edibles that we're talking about here today. And garlic mustard. Garlic mustard, like again, if you're hiking through the woods in the springtime, you're going to see it. It's everywhere. It's an invasive species. You can harvest it at will. It's not like one of the most fantastic wild edibles, though. If you like pesto, it makes a really awesome pesto substitute for basil. It's garlicky, it's got a little bit of bitterness to it, it's slightly peppery. The flowers are also beautiful and abundant. They make a really nice garnish if you like to dress up your dinner plate. But it's everywhere. It's invasive. Don't hesitate to pull it out. Some people, just yank it out religiously. But it can be delicious when used properly. Wild ramps. This is a favorite and also somewhat controversial. Ramps, wild leeks, Allium trichocum is a species that grows all throughout Appalachia, and it has been over-harvested in areas at times. There's some controversy about whether or not it's actually endangered, but their Penn State Ag Extension has been doing a study about it for the last decade. Eric Burkhart has been leading that study, and I think Catherine Pugh is running it now, and I know that they're doing a presentation about it here in May, I believe. I have to catch up with them about that, but ramps are collected throughout Appalachia into Michigan and down into the Smoky Mountains. I mean, they're all over the place. But one of the most unique things about Allium trichocum is that it has a 7-year maturity cycle. So from the germinated seed, it'll take 7 seasons for that plant to get to the point where it's mature enough to produce seed again. So this is one of those scenarios where very literally, if you harvest the entire patch, dig it up, and you can see here with the roots, the rhizomes exposed here. If you do that to an entire patch, it will not come back, period. So that's why we need to exercise a level of caution when collecting ramps. However, that said, there's not a fantastic picture that I could find for it, but basically, if you can see my cursor here, this bottom portion, if you're to collect the plant above where my cursor is, it will come back. No worries, no concerns. So if you ever find them, or if you're familiar with them, when you're trying to pull the plant up, you can do a number of different things to collect it. You can literally just use garden shears and cut them off, and that's probably the most sustainable way to do it. However, you don't get the nice feature of the bulb, which is kind of similar to a cross between garlic and onion. Sautés beautifully with mushrooms like morels. Along with a number of other things, you can pickle it. It makes fantastic pickle. Use the greens in a number of different ways to preserve them. Like you can make ramp oil, ramp salt. It's really a beautiful flavor. And if Jess in the earlier presentation, Jesse talked about our relationship. If we have a good relationship, like this image that we're seeing right here, that's a spot that I've been going to for about a decade, and it's literally never changed. in my perspective, it doesn't look any different. It's no thicker or thinner. And I mean, we've pulled hundreds, if not thousands of pounds out of this location. That's literally acres. It's really hard to document. I probably need a drone or something like that, but it's literally like a mountainside. And, you know, for dozens and dozens of acres, it's literally just the ground floor is carpeted with ramps. It's quite a trek to get in and out. We've had to be very creative over the years of how to actually, you know, pull it out. But so we do a number of different processes of harvesting. We'll take the bulbs only and leave the rhizomes in the ground. And there's a number of different ways that you can do that. If you just get down into the soil and kind of pop it with your thumb, it will break off. That does take, it's messy and it takes a good bit of labor. And we also just collect the leaves. This is a very important note about transplanting. This plant transplants like very well. If you know of an area that is similar to where you're finding it, that's more convenient, or that you know, doesn't have a whole lot of ground cover, it's a well-established woods. You can take this plant, you know, with the dirt and roots intact, and put it into the ground, and it will it'll take off. You're going to want to wait for a number of years, maybe a decade, before you start harvesting it freely, but it transplants really well. And these are some of the plants that grow in association with it. Trillium, this is a lookalike. The lily of the valley, we want to stay away from that. And this is a crazy example that I found at one time of ramps growing in association with cleaver, which is an edible as well, and stinging nettles. It's kind of wild. Spring mushrooms, morels. Morels grow all over the place. They grow in our area, and I'm excited about them coming up soon. And there's a number of other mushrooms that are going to be coming up here. Some are easier to find than others. Morels are going to be the most difficult, but you probably are going to see these if you have wood chip beds around. This is also something that a homesteader can introduce into their gardens very easily. Just add wood, you know, if you have wood chips, or you line the borders of your beds with wood chips, you can purchase this. You can purchase spawn on the internet from a number of different businesses, and it's super easy to just introduce it into the wood chips. You just basically mix it into some of the wood chips, and then cover it over, and the following season you're going to have these popping up, and it will really help your plants to thrive as well. Wine caps are a saprophyte, and I'm going to try and talk about the relationships that these organisms have with their substrate that they're growing on. Some are saprophytic, some are parasitic, and some are mycorrhizal. But there's a lot to cover when it comes to mushrooms. So again, I'm going to refer to the reference guides later on, but you're going to want the reference guides to make sure that you know what you're doing, what you're looking at. There's mushrooms that look like the wine cap, but none that look exactly like this. You know, it's going to have a veil. It has the presented gills. The spore print is white, and they're very meaty. They're a cousin of portobello. They eat really well. There's a number of different kinds of morels. The Morchella family has a lot of people refer to these as the little blacks, or some people refer to these, the Esculenta, as the haystacks. They come up later in the season because they get very big. They call them haystacks. The mushroom has a hollow format. There's multiple habitats that they'll grow in. Jesse earlier referenced that they were growing in their garden because they laid down some ash wood chips. They always grow in dirt, so they wouldn't be growing on those wood chips. But that's one of the really interesting things about morels. There's like, no one's really figured out what exactly the morel growing scenario is. There's so many different variations. So it's not like a mycorrhizal that grows in association with a particular tree growing in association with its root system. So again, you want to have the book. These are hard to mistake. There's the false morel. It really looks like just completely mutated. It doesn't look really anything similar to the true honeycomb of a morel. And the Morchella alata is going to cover the earlier species that are going to be coming up really soon here with dead and dying elm, ash trees. You can find them in feral apple orchards. You're probably not going to find many of those around here, but they do grow in association with feral apples. They're going to grow in close relation to the trees that you're going to find them with. I'm going to talk about trees a number of times. It's really something that you want to know. You want to know your trees. That's going to help you to find the mushrooms. If you find an area that has lots of elm, especially dead and dying elm, you're very likely to find these black morels. And the Morchella esculenta grows later on in the season, typically in association with tulip poplar trees, mature tulip poplar trees. So if you know any hardwood stands that are heavy on tulip poplars, if you can go there and check back periodically in early May, you're likely to find morels growing there. Dryad saddle. It's not the best eating mushroom, but you can eat it. It has a very interesting watermelon rind aroma. It's pretty abundant in like forest hollows and in areas like riparian areas along stream banks, down trees. It is a saprophyte, grows on dead wood. It's a really interesting mushroom. They call it pheasant back because they also call it pheasant back because of the texture you can see on the surface of the mushroom there. Winter oyster is also literally everywhere. It's really hard to mistake with anything. It only grows on dead wood. If you find a mushroom growing on dead wood that has gills present like this, that are coming straight, like literally they come straight out of the tree. There's no stem really. It's just the gills coming straight up from the tree out to the fronds. Presents like a shelf like this or a leaflet. That's an oyster or a pleurotus variety in that family. And I'm trying to keep track of time here. I'm a little concerned about time. I think I might only have a few minutes left, but I'm going to try and run through these quick. Edible plants that we can find throughout the year. These we kind of got out of spring. That's the end of spring, but through the rest of the season, we're going to see really fun plants coming up in riparian areas like pawpaw along roadways and railways, wineberries, and elderberry. Certainly other things like raspberries and blackberries come up, but these things I think are a little bit more interesting. Everybody knows what those are. Also, there's a ton of wild blueberry in our area. Elderberry has lots of medicinal values. It's really delicious. You can eat the berries and the flowers. You might have heard of fritter cakes or flower fritter cakes. Some people take the flowers and they batter them and fry them, and they're delicious. Wineberry is also a super interesting berry that grows all over the place. It has an easy way of identifying it is that it has these kind of enclosed spiny capsules that the berries break out of when they're mature. The low bush blueberry, like literally is all over the place around here. If you've ever taken a hike up on top of the mountain, you've likely hiked through it, past it. Pawpaw is so cool. It's the largest Native American fruit. And like literally every other fruit that we grow in North America, this is the largest. Everything else has been introduced from somewhere else. It has a flavor like a cross between a banana, pineapple, and a mango. And it grows in riparian areas along waterways. You'll find it grown in the forest, like in the mountains sometimes, but it's super rare. But it does happen. Some of the seasonal mushroom highlights that we'll find later on in the year: chanterelles, black trumpets, chicken of the woods, hen of the woods, bluets. These are super cool mushrooms. They're going to be easier to find if you're looking for them. There's not many lookalikes that are dangerous, save for bluets, but we'll try and run through these really quickly. Chanterelles are one of my favorites. They're awesome. It's literally what started my business. My brother and I were out foraging, and we found a huge patch, just the whole forest floor covered with them. And we decided to collect them all, and it ultimately worked out to be about 150 pounds. And that's what started, that's really what started Wild Purveyors. This is a mycorrhizal species. It grows in association with the root system of established mature oaks. And it has these variegated gills. So one of the identifying features, the spore print is whitish, slightly yellow. The flesh is white throughout, and it's got an apricot aroma. It's pretty easy to identify once you find it. Once you find it once, you'll never be mistaken again. I already talked about the habitat a little bit. Black trumpets are another really cool one. They're in the chanterelle family. These are also mycorrhizal, growing in association with mature oaks. These grow in mossy areas typically. All chanterelles are going to be in areas with good drainage. You're not going to find them in marshy areas at all. Like slight grades, hillsides. That's where you're going to want to look. Chicken mushroom is super awesome and super hard to mistake with anything. It's a great eater. It's called chicken of the woods or chicken mushroom because of the fact that it has texture similar to cooked chicken. It's a great substitute if you're vegan or vegetarian. This would be an awesome mushroom to mix in with your stir fries. It cooks on the grill like it's just amazing. You can marinate it and put it on the grill, and you literally could fool people with the texture being very similar to chicken. Hen of the woods. This is called hen of the woods because it kind of looks like the feathers of a hen. It grows. This is saprophytic. This is only going to grow on dead and dying wood, and it only grows in association with oak trees. So you're literally going to find it growing on wood. And getting a 5-minute warning here, so I'm going to try and run through these. This mushroom has a pore structure. It's tightly clustered, and the spore print is white. And as you can see, it grows very large clusters with very large trees. The bluet mushroom deserves a minute or two. It is a saprophyte. It grows on dead leaf. It grows on dead material. So leaf litter, if you find it, that's one of the identifying features, is that it's literally going to have its mycelium growing amongst the leaf litter. This is a delicious mushroom. This is also a mushroom that if you're interested in introducing mushrooms into your homesteading practices, you can actually propagate this by if you find it out in the wild, like grind it up with some water, like literally put in the blender and pour it into your leaf, like if you collect your leaves, pour it into a leaf bed, you'll have these growing in the following season. The flesh is purple throughout. You want to reference your guides, your field guide. It looks like the blue Cortinarius. That will make you sick. Stay away from it. Know this mushroom, or don't pick it and eat it. Okay, references. Definitely, if you're looking to get out there and pick mushrooms, buy some books. Invest in some books. Go to the library, look these authors up, find their books, and do some research, document. So for mushrooms, Gary Linkoff is a fantastic author for mushroom guides. The Complete Mushroom Hunter is something that definitely is in my library, and I would recommend in others. Bill Russell is another great author. Both of these authors focus on Pennsylvania in the Mid-Atlantic region. And then the National Audubon Society's Field Guide to Mushrooms, fantastic book. I would definitely recommend that as well. Very technical, but it'll help. Plants and Berries, Samuel Thayer books, the Forager's Harvest. If you're going to pick one, that's what I would do. Edible Wild Plants by Peter Dykman and Thomas Elias. That's a great one too. The Peterson Field Guide for Edible Wild Plants is also good, but I'd pick Samuel Thayer first. For trees, the Field Guide to Trees by National Audubon Society is really a great reference, and I would rely on that for sure. The Arbor Day Foundation, they have an awesome online resource. It's kind of a rabbit hole, but if you answer the questions, you'll find the exact tree and lots of information about the tree that you're looking for to identify. So that's it, I guess. If anybody has any questions, I'd love to answer them.
Hi, Cavan, it's Noelle. Chris Mayer put a question in the chat box. She asked, are folks allowed to forage or harvest from state forest lands?
That's a great question. And I'm sorry that I didn't refer to that. So if you're harvesting for personal use only, lots of public lands, that's fine. But what you want to do for sure, wherever you're wanting to forage, to collect anything, you're going to want to reference that public lands rules and regulations. And you can find that at park offices and whatnot. They'll be very explicit about the collection of plants and organisms. But definitely make sure. There are some public lands where you can do it, with very little regulation, but reference the park office and the rules and regulations associated with that public land, for sure.
Okay, great. Let's see, there's one more question. Do the poisonous lookalikes grow in proximity of the edibles?
Some do. You definitely, again, don't cut any corners. Be 100% certain. Always reference the guides. The guidebooks, if they're worth anything, especially the ones that I've referenced, they're going to talk about those poisonous lookalikes. Some of the poisonous lookalikes grow in other seasons, so they won't grow at the same time. But some will grow at the same time. Chicken mushroom can be mistaken with jack-o'-lantern mushroom. It's the difference between a gilled mushroom and a pore structure, mushroom with a pore structure. The chicken of the woods mushroom has a pore structure. The jack-o'-lantern has gills. I mean, if you're researching enough to know, you're going to see that there's gills and you're not going to touch it.
Okay. Great. We are just at 10:39, right before 10:40. So I think we'll follow Chris's suggestion from the opening. If anybody has any other questions, they can hold them until the wrap-up panel discussion. And we'll go ahead and end this session. And folks can, let's see, the next session at 10:40, Foodscaping with Jesse and Lorenzo Verasano, and then Getting Started with Honey and Honeybees, Greg Hildebrand. And all of you should have those Zoom links.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you.